of industrial patents, George Meek, at age 60, retired and began 25 years of intensive research into life after death. He traveled the world to locate and to establish research projects with top medical doctors, psychiatrists, physicists, biochemists, ministers, priests, and rabbis. In 1987, he published the conclusions of his quarter-of-a-century research.
For the first time in 8,000 years of recorded history, we can say with certainty that our mind, memory, personality, and soul will survive physical death.
But if our soul survives, is there any research to tell us where it will be? Dr. R.C. Sproul thinks he may have an answer.
When we talk about the whereness of heaven, I believe that it is a place, but it's a different kind of place. It's a place that crosses a dimension, a dimensional barrier, which in terms of our concept of dimensional space, it could be right here, it could be right next door, but into another realm, beyond, transcendentally beyond the three-dimensional type of reality that we experience normally.
The Bible teaches that heaven is in the northernmost part of the universe. Isaiah talks about Lucifer leading a rebellion against God in the sides of the north. Job 26 talks about heaven, God making heaven and stretched it over an empty place. Scientists know there is a hole in the northernmost part of the universe. Perhaps heaven is just beyond that, about 21 billion light years away.
But whether heaven is right next door or beyond our gaze someplace out there in the sky, we can be sure it's there. If, for example, it's been proven, as George Meek suggests, that we live on after physical death, the clear implication is that there must be a place, a geography for heaven. Could it be that we must become as a little child to find it? Dr. Melvin Morse, a leading world authority on dying children, described himself as an arrogant critical care physician with an emotional bias against anything spiritual. But that was before he began a series of scientifically based studies of dying children. He found that many others had already arrived at the conclusions he would soon come to.
Good. Well, then that's what we'll do.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
You bet.
When I review the medical literature, I think it points clearly to scientific evidence that something survives human death. This evidence includes case reports, reviews of the existing scientific literature, as well as direct experimental evidence, all causing a growing body of evidence in the scientific community, making it respectable to speculate that something survives human death.
I think the message of the near-death experience is that there is something there other than our physical reality. There is a spiritual realm. I also think that there's the message of God. There is a God there. It's similar to the general revelation that we see in the first chapter of Romans that Paul wrote in the New Testament, that the law of God is written on the hearts of all men. And I think that the near-death experience is bringing that to the person's awareness at the time they're in the process of dying.
Some people have come to me with a question, isn't there some middle ground between skeptics and believers in certain religions about this issue of heaven, or hell for that matter? My point of view is there is absolutely no middle ground. Either heaven exists or it doesn't exist. The important thing is to find out if it does exist, what is necessary, what's involved, and what authority do you use to know that it exists. When you go to the Bible and you look at the 668 historical prophecies, all shown to be true, that gives you some confidence that any future activities, such as life after death and heaven, would also be true.
Among a growing group of scientists who seem to be accepting of the notion of an eternal spirit is Dr. Stephen Hawking, widely regarded as the most brilliant scientific mind of this or perhaps any age. In what many regard as a complete turnabout, Dr. Hawking, in his book, The Theory of Everything, The Origin and the Fate of the Universe, writes,
"It would be very difficult to explain why the universe should have begun in just this way, except as the act of a God who intended to create beings like us." The whole history of the universe can be said to be the work of God. However, if we do discover a complete period should, in time, be understandable by everyone, not just a few scientists. If we find the answer to that, it would be the ultimate triumph of human reason, for then we would know the mind of God.
At long last, the discussion is out on the scientific table. And Hawking is not the only scientist who has opened his mind to the intriguing possibilities of a world that was created especially for immortal life. Nobel Prize-winning biochemist Francis Crick states, "The origin of life appears to be almost a miracle. So many are the conditions that would have to be satisfied to get it going." The internationally renowned physicist Paul Davies concedes that it is in the fundamental constants of nature that we find the most surprising evidence for a grand design. Another Nobel Prize winner in the field of physiology and medicine, John C. Eccles, asserts that in some mysterious way, God is the creator of all living forms, and particularly in human persons, each with conscious selfhood of an immortal soul. And astronomer Owen Gingerich states flatly that, "Just as I believe the book of Scripture illuminates the path to God, so I believe the book of nature, with its astonishing details, a blade of grass, or the resonant levels of the carbon atom, also suggests a God of purpose, a God of design." With God now in the picture as the author of that grand design, the discussion suddenly branches out into other scientific areas. Is there anything that can bring the assurance of religion and the pragmatism of science together? Well, perhaps there is. In his new book, Dr. T. Lee Bauman suggests the unifying concept may be light.
In my research, I have tried to look closely at the latest information on near-death experiences, at the latest thinking in quantum physics, at new interpretations of information from the Bible, as well as the mysterious, fascinating nature of light. Other researchers, notably Drs. Moody and Morse, have found light to be the keynote event, the element that always leads to a transformation in their lives. But the question is, why light? Why not darkness? Physiologically, isn't death a descent into darkness? Yet Dannion Brinkley and almost all others who have experienced near death see light. Why? The fact is, there is no rational medical explanation for this occurrence. Einstein, however, showed us in the flow of light the corollary of the eternal now. Today, more scientists are recognizing the significance of the electromagnetic radiation that pervades our daily lives, including light. Incredibly, physicists have performed experiments that even suggest light is conscious. That is to say, in these experiments, light appears to be capable of making decisions. If a relationship possibly exists between light and a supreme being, perhaps it manifests in ways that have already been revealed to those who over the centuries have been believers in God.
Scripture abounds with references that are especially meaningful in this new context. In Psalms 104 we read, "O Lord my God, thou art very great. Thou art clothed with honor and majesty, who coverest thyself with light as with a garment." John chapter 8 verse 12 says, "Again Jesus spoke to them, saying, I am the light of the world. He who follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." And in 1 John chapter 1 verse 5, a clear testimony is given. "This is the message we have heard from him and proclaimed to you, that God is light, and in him is no darkness at all." This barely scratches the surface of both the Old and New Testament references concerning God manifesting himself as light.
The Bible is replete with references to light, its power and function. Could it be that science, after all these years, is about to write a preamble to the book of Genesis? in a universe teeming with all kinds of interstellar activity.